Welcome to another edition of Living Legacies. I'm Tom Morrow, your host, and today we have with us a lady that's not quite old enough to be a legend yet, or a legacy, but the work that she's done in Oceanside certainly can be considered momentous. Colleen O'Hara, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Tom. I'm glad to hear that I'm not old enough to do this, but I have to tell you, I feel honored to be on your show.
Well, I know that you and I are not that far apart in age, so I just wanted you to know that how I felt about that. But let's get right to it. I know that a lot of people, our newer residents in Oceanside, will know you as former City Council member Colleen O'Hara, but you've certainly got a lot more to talk about besides just the City Council. So you were born in Orange County?
Right, in the city of Orange, although I lived in Santa Ana. My family lived in Santa Ana, so I was raised in the city of Santa Ana.
And this was back during the 40s and the 50s. You went to Santa Ana High School?
Right, I'm Santa Ana Saint.
Santa Ana Saint,
yes. Graduated from high school in 1955.
Well, before you get that far along, now this first picture that we have of you, future Ginger Rogers, were you taking tap dancing classes there?
Yes, I started taking tap dancing when I was about 4 years old, and I still tap occasionally.
Oh, that's right. You and the ladies get together and have those sessions every once in a while.
Right. I still have tap shoes. They're bigger than the ones when I was 4. But
now this was at 4 years old?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We were talking before the show. That's during World War II, and we remember the blackouts that we had. And,
right. I remember the special shades that we had to pull down and douse all the lights. Could have a few candles on in the house. But
what did your parents do? What kind of work did they do?
My dad was the projector of the West Coast Theater in Santa Ana, so I always got into the show for free on Saturdays. I'd round up all the kids in the neighborhood and take them to the show for free on Saturdays. My mother, most of the time, was a stay-at-home mom, although during the war she became a Rosie the Riveter.
Oh, is that right?
Worked in a rivet factory to support the war.
What, aircraft company or?
Yes, some company in Santa Ana. I don't remember exactly what company it was.
Any brothers and sisters?
I have one sister. She's 2 years younger than I am. She teaches school out in Palm Springs. Has taught school for 35 years.
This next picture is, what is that? You're about your 6th grade?
Yes, I think so.
And you were telling me that when I was asking you when you got interested in politics, that's kind of been a lifelong interest?
Well, I think it's just been a natural for me. I love to join organizations. It seems like every time I get involved in some project or join some organization, I end up being in charge of things, being the president. When I was in high school, I was the president of the International Christian Youth Fellowship, and I traveled all over the United States when I was 18.
That's quite an honor for a young person.
Well, it's something that most 18-year-olds today probably wouldn't be allowed to do because it's a different time, but back then I traveled by myself, and from state to state, organizing youth groups and speaking at state youth conventions.
I was in CYF, but
I
just thought it was just something that the local church had. I didn't realize that you guys were organized.
Right. Internationally, that meant United States and Canada.
And this next picture is the way you looked back at that time. This is when you were a senior in high school.
Yes, that's my high school graduation picture. It was right after that graduation that I started doing that traveling.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Chapman College in Orange. It's now called Chapman University.
What did you study?
Elementary education. So I came out of there with a teaching credential after 4 years.
It was pretty commonplace for especially young girls, because I grew up we were contemporaries. Most of the young girls that either went to commercial school and became a secretary, or they became an elementary school teacher.
That's right. Back then, when I was at Chapman, I would say 90% of the women in my class were studying to be school teachers.
Mm-hmm. And
it was a good way to catch a husband.
Was that
which we all wanted to do, of course.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to catch a husband?
Well, I married my college sweetheart.
Mm-hmm. And he was from Oceanside.
So he was from Oceanside, and that's how I ended up here in Oceanside.
John Richardson?
John Richardson, part of the Richardson brothers,
mm-hmm.
Who had a contracting business in Oceanside and had for many, many years. They built many of the buildings in Oceanside were built by Richardson brothers.
Mm-hmm. Now, John, he went on to become a teacher. And,
yes, he did.
And you were telling me he just retired not too long ago from El Camino High School?
Right.
Okay. You taught for how long?
I taught for about 7 years, and then I quit teaching to stay home and start a family.
Mm-hmm. You have 2 daughters?
Two daughters, both of whom still live in Oceanside.
Now, when you decided to go back to work, did you think about teaching?
Oh yes, I put applications in to teach in all of the school districts around. That was 1972. I thought that my teaching credential was like an insurance policy. I would always be able to get a job, but I was wrong. In 1972, there were no teaching jobs available. Money was very tight.
Mm-hmm.
We were in a very severe recession. They just were not hiring
What'd
teachers.
you do?
Well, I took a job for a while with the San Diego County Welfare Department, and then had an opportunity to take a paralegal job with the Legal Aid Society here in Oceanside. So I did administrative hearings for the Legal Aid Society,
mm-hmm.
unemployment insurance hearings, Social Security disability hearings.
Is that where you got interested in becoming an attorney?
Yes, I still was hoping that a teaching job would open up because I did love teaching, but not knowing whether that was ever going to happen, I decided to start law school at night.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to a part-time evening program for 4 years and worked at my paralegal job in the daytime.
Well, now we have to kind of whoa up here for a minute because we're going real fast, and there was a lot of things that happened to you that were pretty important. You and 4 other ladies founded the Women's Resource Center, which is one of the stalwart organizations here in town to help women and children. And at that same time, you were involved in the anti-war movement, or was that a little later?
No, actually, the anti-war movement had pretty much dissipated by then. At least my participation in it, and that was earlier. It was about 1970 that I became very concerned about the direction that things were moving in the Vietnamese conflict.
So you were really a kind of a homemaker at that time then?
Yeah, yes, I was. I was home with my children. I did not believe the domino theory on communism. I wasn't convinced that if South Vietnam fell, that the next to fall would be the United States. I just wasn't
mm-hmm.
buying that.
Mm-hmm. And
I was very concerned that we were spending a lot of our young lives in Vietnam, and it just didn't seem to be going anywhere.
Well, of course, in hindsight, that's exactly right. I mean, you were
well,
right.
History has proved me right.
Right. I know that recently there was a very, well, I don't know how big it was, but it was controversial. The activist Angela Davis, she came to recently for a speech at Cal State San Marcos, and there was some growling and grousing about the fact that you and her used to be buddies. Would you explain that one?
I was at an anti-Vietnam War rally once in about 1971 with about 5,000 other people, and Angela Davis happened to be the speaker.
So you and Angela and 5,000 others got together.
5,000 of her closest friends were there.
So that's really it.
Right. My involvement in the anti-war movement was participation in 2 or 3 protest rallies. I was not a mover and shaker in that movement at all.
Well, tell me why the Women's Resource Center? What got you started there? Why is that important in your life?
Well, you mentioned that myself and 4 other women got that started. We were all friends.
Who are they?
Well, let's see. Kelly Strasser, who was a school teacher at the time, Sue Richardson, a marriage and family counselor, Diane Finesse, who was a homemaker, and Marina Sanchez, who was the director of the North County Chicano Federation. We were all concerned that there were no social service agencies in the area that were providing any kind of counseling or support services for rape victims. So we wrote a proposal to the County of San Diego to get a rape crisis counseling program funded. And it got funded. So that's how we opened the Women's Resource Center.
Now, you were telling me also that somewhere along the lines, Casa de Amparo got involved. I mean, that was part of a spin-off from the Women's Resource Center?
As soon as we opened the doors of the Women's Resource Center, we had the Oceanside Police Department practically camped on our doorstep, begging us to do something about child abuse. And so we started working with families, and the concern was a lot of families where there was the potential for abuse. There wasn't enough going on that the police could remove the children, but they were concerned that that's the direction these families were moving. So the Women's Resource Center founded a child abuse program, which we named Casa de Amparo.
And it's primarily for children, right?
Yes.
And the Women's Resource Center is for women and their children or families?
That's right, because after Casa de Amparo got up and going, it spun off and become its own corporation. And in the meantime, Women's Resource Center, again responding to community needs, had gotten very involved in the whole issue of domestic violence.
Both started right here in Oceanside, continue today operating here in Oceanside.
Right.
Well, there was a time from 1978 to 79 you were the executive director of the Women's Resource Center. How did that come about?
Well, the first director that was hired by the group of us who started the center was a director for 4 years, and then she moved on rather suddenly, and so I had offered to take the job for 3 or 4 months while we looked for a new director. That ended up being a 2-year commitment rather than the 3 months. And I stayed that long because I became so concerned that we had no housing for these victims who couldn't leave their homes because they had no place to go. And so I wrote a grant, and I went to the city and got money from the city to start the emergency shelter. So I didn't want to leave until I knew that was a secure program.
And Marva took over, what, in 1980?
Right. Marva Bledsoe, I had hired on my staff to help me raise the money to start the emergency shelter. So when I moved on to start my law practice, she took over as executive director and has been doing that for 21 years now.
Now, when did, I don't know how to put this in any other way, but when did Larry come into your life, Larry O'Hara, your husband?
Well, I met Larry in the early 80s. I was on the Planning Commission in Oceanside, and at that time Larry worked for the Rancho Del Oro Development Company that was planning all of the Rancho Del Oro area. So they had to come to the Planning Commission to get their approvals, and he always tells people he was sitting in the audience that night, looked up there and said, you know, gee, there's only one person up there with any brains, and she has a nice sense of humor, and she sure is cute.
Well, I hope you were available then, too.
I was available.
Okay.
Actually, I had been single for many years at that point, and Larry got involved in the Chamber of Commerce, and I was involved in the Chamber, and so that's how we really got.
Well, you were
better
president
acquainted.
of the Chamber, Oceanside Chamber, at one time.
Well, yes, of course.
Yeah. Tell me, how many organizations are you? I mean, have you ever counted up how many organizations you've been involved in your life, and how many you're still involved with?
You know, I've never counted them up. I don't know how many there are, but I know there have been. What
are your most important, or what do you really concentrate on now? Because I asked you to serve on a particular board here not too long ago, and you said you're stretched too thin. I'd like to hear how you're stretched too thin.
Well, of course, I still serve on the board of directors for the Women's Resource Center,
and I would imagine that's your number one priority.
That is my number one priority. And I have served on the Hospice of the North Coast Board of Directors since about 1992, I believe. And I've seen them through their transition from being a partnership with Tri-City Hospital to becoming a freestanding hospice program. So that has taken a large commitment of my time in the last 8 or 9 years. And then more recently, I joined the board of the Oceanside Museum of Art, because I think that is just a real jewel in Oceanside, and I'm just delighted to be a part of that organization.
It's good for an attorney to have a little culture in their life.
Right. One more big involvement I have is the Oceanside Seroptimists Club.
Oh, yeah.
Which I've been a member of since 1989, and this year I am vice president, so next year I will be president of the Seroptimists. You
ran for city council the first time in a field of 16 in 1992?
That's correct.
And won?
And I won.
So you served 2 terms. You got reelected in 96?
In 1996 I got reelected. And then in the year 2000, rather than running again for my seat on the council, I chose to run for mayor, and didn't win that one.
Have any regrets? I mean, if you had to do over again, would you have run for re-election?
No, I would have done exactly what I did.
What do you think is one of your some of your proudest accomplishments when you were on the city council?
When I got elected, I had no idea what kind of financial shape the city was in. I was appalled at how close we were to the edge. You know, it felt like we were ready to go over the brink. We hired Tom Wilson to be our city manager, and I know that Tom, over the years, made friends and he made enemies while he was here. But the one thing that Tom did was really help us get back on a solid financial footing. That, in turn, allowed us to do some expansion in our police department, our fire department, and increase those services that were so badly needed. We also were able to expand our recreation programs because I believe strongly that you don't just hire policemen to arrest people. You have to provide, particularly our youth, alternative activities to be involved in, so they don't go down that path.
Well, I think the city's done a pretty good job of that over the years. We've got a lot of nice parks, and we've got some great recreational facilities. And like you said, if the money wasn't there, you wouldn't have been able to do that. But
that's correct.
I know,
yes.
Tom, he did have his detractors, but I think everybody, whether they liked it or not, they have to admit that he really did help right the city financially.
He turned us on a much more positive path. Yes. Another thing that I did while I was on the council that I'm still working on, fortunately, is the multiple habitat conservation plan.
Now explain that to me. Why is that important?
Well, Tom, I just did a 90-minute program on on KOCT.
Well, can you give it to me in 90 seconds?
The 90-second version. This is a plan that will set aside lands now that will never be built upon in order to free up other parcels of land that can be built on. It's a plan really designed to accommodate the housing and the commercial development that we need to accommodate our future growth, but will also preserve some of our open spaces so that we comply with state and federal laws, and so that we have a nicer environment, so we don't end up concreting everything over.
Is this plan being well received, or are you goring somebody's ox, or are you having is this going to be a fight?
This plan has been 9 years in the making, and in those 9 years, around our table when we meet to develop this plan are all of the wildlife agencies, the staffs from the 7 North County cities involved. We've got biologists telling us, what needs to be done for to preserve the animals, botanists to tell us what to do for the plants. We have representatives of the building industry. We have representatives from environmental groups such as the Sierra Club. So everybody has had their input into this plan. There will be some people who don't like it, because there are some people who don't want us to do any building anymore. And there are some people at the other end of the spectrum who think it's just silly to have to worry about these birds and plants.
It's one of those things probably that you won't get a lot of thanks today, but your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren will probably remember that, Grandma one time had a hand in this and she saved a lot of things for us.
That's right. In fact, when I talked to one of my daughters this morning, who's the mother of 5 of my 11 grandchildren, I told her I was going to be a living legacy today, and she said, "Well, Mom, you're always a living legacy at our house."
And that you are. Thank you very much, Colleen, for coming in and sharing your life with us. And I told you that she had a lot to do with with what's gone on in Oceanside for the past 20 or 30 years, and I appreciate you tuning in. Tune in again next time for another edition of Living Legacies. I'm Tom Morrow, and I hope you enjoyed the show. This program is made possible through the generous underwriting grants of Hatter, Williams & Purdy Insurance Services of Oceanside, providing North County with complete insurance needs for more than half a century. The TriQuest Corporation, providing quality office and manufacturing space in Oceanside. And the North County Times, serving all of North County with complete local daily news coverage and internet services.